On this, the eve of the Sabbath of the undead, I call upon you to witness my supreme trial.
Hey comic book fans, Kevin Gibbon with you once again with another episode of Comics Let's Talk. But right now I want to talk about Dracula.
And so you destroy every living soul on this earth, and are left with an empty world to command. Is that what you want, Count Dracula? A last blaze of utter horror and violence? The ghastly annihilation of an entire planet? Is this your own death wish? I have chosen 4 messengers of death. 4 horsemen of my created apocalypse. 4 carriers of the plague who will infect their miserable brethren. You, Van Helsing, are now one of the 4. The body of your granddaughter will never be corrupted. It will be her joy to walk at my side.
Now first, a special note. We will not be discussing Tomb of Dracula from Marvel during this broadcast. We're going to create a separate show for that as we don't have time during this show. Besides that, series has led to a lot of great stuff, including the Blade movie and TV series and other stuff, which we'll talk about during that show. But for today, we're going to leave that out, and let's look at a brief history of Dracula from Comic Vine. Though not the first vampire in fiction, Dracula was the most successful. Appearing in the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker in 1895, the book has not been out of print since then. He is partially based on Vlad Tepes, a Wallachian voivode who lived during the 15th century. Renowned for his inflexibility and cruelty towards his enemies, he gave birth to the Dracula Legend. The name Dracula means small dragon in Romanian, for he and his father belonged to the Order of Saint Knights. The legend started when Bram Stoker read a part of his memoir still stored at the British Museum at the end of the 19th century. The fact that Stoker's novel is in the public domain and the fertile ground for exploration that is the vampire myth assures that the king of vampires will not be going away anytime soon. First, let's look at Chaos Comics. Dracula was a powerful vampire, but next to Purgatori, he was practically nothing. He was first her lover and swore his loyalty to her, but this could not last. Eventually, she judged him to be too powerful in the vampire clan wars, and she decided he would have to be brought down. So while she sought out the chalice of regeneration, he used her to almost gain it for himself. She would not allow that, and battled him at the Vatican, where after a strenuous battle, she ripped his fangs out, and he was permanently burned by the rising sun. Now let's look at DC Comics. Count Dracula was a murderous vampire who ruled in Transylvania. He was killed in his coffin while sleeping by the villagers of his town. They shipped his body to Gotham City in the 1600s. They then buried his body underground so that no one would find it. After being dead for centuries, the Penguin came by looking for a fortune, but instead found Dracula's body. Penguin accidentally cut himself and the blood dropped onto Dracula's dead body. Dracula then awoke and made Penguin his eyes and ears of Gotham. Dracula became obsessed with Batman, thinking that his legacy of darkness has gone on even after his death. Dracula confronted Batman and asked him to join his living off of the undead. Batman rejected this offer. Furious of this, Dracula attacked Batman and nearly killed him. However, the sun came up and almost killed Dracula. Dracula also got obsessed with bringing his dead wife back to life. To do this, he used the life force of Vicky Vale. The Count nearly succeeded in doing so. However, Batman stopped him just in time. Looking at Dracula in the Buffyverse. Dracula's first appearance in the Buffyverse was in the season 5 episode Buffy vs. Dracula of the television series. Dracula came to Sunnydale because he heard about the powers of a slayer and wanted to meet one. He hypnotizes Xander so that he can become his slave, and his eyes around Buffy and the gang. Xander is the one to lead the team to his castle, which is located at the outskirts of Sunnydale. After Buffy staked him and the gang left, Dracula reformed out of mist. After the annihilation of Sunnydale, Dracula kidnapped Xander again. After finding his castle, Buffy went to rescue her friend. Dracula tried to scare her, but Buffy brushed this off. While they were fighting, Dracula told Buffy how he had become a joke and warned that she would one day be forgotten. Buffy scoffed at this and laughed at Dracula for his midlife crisis. After the fight, Dracula agreed to let Xander go. And here's one of the earliest appearances of Dracula in a comic book, The Twilight Zone, number 18 from 1966. In The Impressionist, which runs 7 pages, Jackie Allen, famous impersonator, is confronted by the ghosts of those he impersonates. Bela Lugosi is Dracula, Clark Gable, Humphrey Bogart. It's time for Jackie Allen to be himself, but he doesn't even know who he is anymore. He's afraid of the audience, afraid of people, and doesn't want to be himself, but he is forced to live life as himself forever in the Twilight Zone. Dracula shows up in Gold Key's Yosemite Sam and Bugs Bunny number 6 and 7 from 1972. Then we come to Werewolf by Night, number 15 from Marvel Comics in 1973. The cover art is by Mike Ploog, Death of a Monster, script by Marv Wolfman, pencils by Mike Ploog, inks by Frank Chiaramonte, hope I pronounced that name right, Frank Chiaramonte. Flashback reveals how Baron Russo became a werewolf and began the curse on his family in the present. Dracula attacks Jack and Topaz to retrieve a book that belonged to the Baron. Then we come to Giant-Size Spider-Man number 1 from 1974. Ship of Friends, guest starring Dracula. Script by Len Wein, pencils by Ross Andrew, inks by Don Heck, cover by Gil Kane. Aunt May has become stricken by a deadly new strain of the flu for which there is not a vaccine available in the United States. However, a doctor is currently bringing the vaccine to America via ocean liner. Since Aunt May may not have enough time to wait for it, the wall crawler borrows a skycraft from the Fantastic Four and heads out to sea to retrieve the vaccine. But other people want that vaccine too, namely the Magia and Dracula. It's a great three-way battle on board the SSS Wendell. Cameo appearances by Equinox and the Human Torch. One subplot from this issue continues in Marvel Team-Up number 23. Note, this story was reprinted in 1994 in Spider-Man vs. Dracula number 1. Then we come to Giant-Sized Chillers number 1 from 1974. Origin and first appearance of Lilith, Dracula's daughter, in a new Dracula story, Night of the She-Demon. Script by Marv Wolfman. Pencils by Gene Colan. Inks by Frank Chiaramonte. 2-page text, History of Dracula in Marvel Comics by Wolfman. Reprints. Have you ever seen a huge black vampire? Script by Stan Lee, art by John Romita Jr. from Mystic 25. The Village Graveyard, another story, art by Russ Heath from Weird Worlds number 4. In September 1974, Marvel unleashed Arg upon the comic book world. Like DC's Plop, it was a horror mystery mag with a humorous twist, a love letter to the classic EC comics in the guise of the love child of Tales from the Crypt and Mad. Though it only lasted 5 issues, Old Groove has fond memories of Arg. Even my non-comic pals thought it was kind of cool. Violent, subversive horror in the mighty Marvel manner. What more could a 70s kid or modern-day Groovophile want? Then we come to Blood of the Innocent, 1985. This was one of the first American comic books to be published weekly over 4 weeks. It was written by Ricky Shanklin and Mark Wheatley and drawn by Mark Hemphill and Mark Wheatley, who had previously created the acclaimed science fiction comic book Mars for First Comics. Blood of the Innocent was their first attempt at a horror comic. An epilogue for the series appears in the first and only Warp Graphics annual, along with other short stories by authors and artists then being published by Warp. The series pitted Dracula against Jack the Ripper, who in this series is a psychotic Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence in Victorian London. Then come Dracula in Eternity Comics 4 issues from 1989. Blood of Dracula came out in 1987, going until 1990. Ever since Bram Stoker, the vampire known as Dracula has been haunting the world's dreams, the subject of countless books, movies, and comics. It would seem that there would be little you could do to add to this legend. Still, Apple Comics does just that in Blood of Dracula. The series runs as a serial anthology featuring 3 stories in each issue. In them we see Dracula throughout the ages, hunting for blood in his native land or stalking the streets of America. In one story, set in the 1930s, he comes across a moonshiner who is actually a werewolf and who has been creating other werewolves by putting fillings from his teeth into the libations he distributes. The wildest concept is Dracula in 2199, where the Lord of the Vampires awakens after a long sleep to find himself in a world ruled by cold, hard science and populated by advanced robots. The world has forgotten the mystical. Dracula is determined to show them fear. It's important to note that we're not talking about Tomb of Dracula in this tale, that there was a 3rd series from Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan for Tomb of Dracula, which came out in 1991. Also in 1991, Batman Dracula Red Rain from Comic Vine. In this Elseworlds tale, the Dark Knight detective matches wits and brawn against one of the most dangerous adversaries in literature. A plague of the undead is sweeping across the city, and the police are powerless to stop it. Dracula has come to Gotham, and the streets will run red with the blood of its citizens unless Batman can find a way to defeat the legendary foe. In Gotham City, there have been many killings. The Batman goes out to investigate, but only finds a corpse with its throat cut open. But one night, he is successful and finds a vampire sucking the blood out of the corpse. He attacks, but is beaten. At home, Bruce each night is visited by a woman with her mouth covered in blood, and he soon discovers that he is much faster and stronger than before. He goes again and follows the vampire into its nest, where he finds literally millions. He beats as many as he can until he sees a giant bat. Dracula. He beats Dracula, but did not kill him, and is taken in by a woman, Tanya. This is the woman that visited him in his dreams. She's a vampire. They set up a trap in the manor and kill nearly all the vampires, including Tanya. Dracula kidnaps Gordon, and the Batman finds him. Batman turns into a vampire, and a huge aerial battle takes place, ending with Dracula landing on a spike. It ends with the Batman declaring that Bruce Wayne is dead, but the Batman shall live forever. Then in 1991, we get What If Wolverine Became Lord of the Vampires? Script by Roy Thomas and RJM. Art by Tom Morgan. Guest starring the X-Men, Doctor Strange and the Punisher. A brief Dracula appearance. Cameos by Spider-Man, Magneto, Juggernaut, the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, and finally, Doctor Doom. Then we come to X-Men Classic number 63 from 1991. Cover pencils by Mike Mignola. Inks by P. Craig Russell. Night Scream script by Chris Claremont. Pencils by Bill Sienkiewicz. Inks by Bob Wiacek. The Uncanny X-Men must face off with one of the deadliest creatures in the Marvel Universe, Dracula. If they can't find a way to defeat the Lord of the Vampires, Storm will be lost to him forever. Then in 1993, Spider-Man Unlimited number 20. It's an offbeat tale of vampires, zombies, pseudo-vampires, and your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. At the request of Donna Garth, Hannibal King travels to New York City to track down the original Marvel zombie, Simon Garth. But unbeknownst to Hannibal, Simon has fallen under the control of Lilith, the evil daughter of Dracula. In the meantime, the web-slinger is searching for several missing teenagers and follows their trail to a bizarre nightclub in Midtown. Once inside, Peter bumps into Lilith and Hannibal. He quickly realizes he's in over his head. How will the Amazing One sort out the vampires and the zombies without becoming one himself? An excellent issue with brilliant artwork. Cameo appearances by Mary Jane Watson and Topaz. On notes, Simon Garth previously appeared in Peter Parker Spider-Man from 1999 Annual and 1997. The gatefold cover recaps Hannibal King's recent interactions with Blade and Deacon Frost. Then we come to Dracula, Vlad the Impaler from 1993. I Am Dracula, written by Roy Thomas, art and cover by Esteban Maroto. In this bloody history of the Balkans, no man was the equal of the monstrous prince Vlad Tepes, a man devoid of mercy, a man whose order and deeds condemned not scores, not hundreds, but tens of thousands of men, women, and children to hideous death by impalement. In the first issue, witness the growth of the child, Vlad Dracula, medieval prince of Wallachia, and his divine initiation into an intrigue-laden life of brutality, bloodletting, and betrayal, learning at bitter cost how and why he can trust no man, not even his brother. The child Vlad Dracula grows into a man obsessed with the desire to survive and wreak vengeance. Behold how, as Prince Dracula, he begins to turn that desire into a terrifying reality, and in so doing becomes Vlad the Impaler. Next, there's Dracula and Zorro from 1993, written by Don McGregor, art by Thomas Yates and Rick Magyar. Zorro squares off against the most dangerous enemy in his life, the Lord of the Vampires, Count Dracula. And there is the woman caught between the two powerful foes, Carmelita Rodriguez, who has faced tragedy and loss, only to be confronted by a spine-tingling battle of blood and sacrifice. From 1994, we get Doctor Strange versus Dracula. This 48-page horror fest pits the master of the mystic arts versus Dracula. Don't miss the epic reprinted from Tomb of Dracula, 1972, first series, and Doctor Strange, number 14. A special bonus, Story from Vampire Tales, 1973, number 9, written by Marv Wolfman, Steve Englehart, and Doug Moench. Art by Gene Collin, Tom Palmer, and Russ Heath. Cover by Kyle Baker. Then we come to Frankenstein Dracula Wars from 1995. The cover by Mike Mignola, Part 1. The Gathering Storm by Roy Thomas and Jean-Marc Lofficier. Pencils by Claude St. Aubin. Inks by Alan Nunez. In 1796, while Napoleon Bonaparte's troops ride roughshod over France's foes, Dracula gains vampiric sway over a selfish young woman named Mirka, the daughter of Count Bogdan, in order to increase his unearthly power by marriage. Realizing belatedly that Dracula is one of the undead, Bogdan leads a handful of soldiers into his castle, intending to slay the vampire. But Bogdan's men are instead slain by Dracula, and Dracula has Bogdan's new, undead daughter slay her father. From 1998, we get Curse of Dracula. A mysterious, charismatic figure is moving amongst the circles of San Francisco's political elite when Jonathan Van Helsing and his team of vampire hunters come to town, investigating a string of grisly murders. They know it's only a matter of time before they come face to face with the master of the dark. After that, there's Dampier 2000. Originally planned as a miniseries, Dampier started as a regular Bonelli volume after the closing of Zona X. It was mainly written by the same authors, and because the publisher was trying to launch some new titles, it's published monthly since 2000. In 2001, we get Before the Fantastic Four. After being chased by the agents of Comte Saint-Germain, who are seeking out the amulet of Z, Johnny and Sue Storm, Sue's friend Carmi, and her uncle Max Parrish have come to Empire State University to break into the office of Cammy's recently deceased father to learn what they can from his notes about the amulet. Max holds Johnny over the office widow while the girl keeps an eye out. After deactivating the silent alarm, Johnny breaks into the office and begins checking the computer out for information. Johnny quickly remembers that only Max can figure it out and goes up to the door of the roof to unlock it and let him in. While outside, Cammy and Sue are keeping lookout. Sue thinks back to the events that led them to this moment. They had just escaped the minions of Comte Saint-Germain as Cammy finally comes to terms with the fact that her father is dead. Max suggests that they turn the amulet of Z over to the authorities. As the teens head back to their home, they spot Saint-Germain's car outside of Cammy's home. They double back to the Storm House to catch their breaths. While the girls figure out their next move, Johnny is down in his garage. When he opens one of the tool drawers, he is surprised to find the amulet of Z in there. Before he can shout out, Max put a hand over his mouth to keep him quiet. With Cammy and Sue rejoining them, Max explains that the amulet disappeared out of his pocket not long after he parted ways with the others. With things as bizarre as they are, Max suggests that they take a more proactive approach to dealing with their problem without the authorities. Inside Professor Brenda's office, looking at what they can about the amulet of Z or the people who are following them. Remembering the license plate number on the car that was chasing them, Max looks it up and they learn the identity of their pursuer. As they are discussing the historical implications of the man they are facing, the book that was prompting the windows open suddenly falls out and lands in Cammy's lap below. Without the book keeping the window propped open, the silent alarm goes off. To make matters worse, Johnny and Max spot more of Saint Germain's minions heading their way. Watching this from the air, Comte gloats over the impending victory. Suddenly, he is struck by a metal bolt from his master, Dracula, who is still not impressed with the progress of this mission. He orders Saint Germain to recover the amulet immediately. Until next time, this is Kevin Gibbons saying so long and keep reading those comics.